Hello and welcome to the Jesus Witch podcast. I'm your host, Lena Elsaya Lee, also known as Lena the Jesus Witch on TikTok and Instagram. The Jesus Witch podcast is a show dedicated to opening the conversation about including Jesus in witchery practices. The goal of this podcast is to not be evangelical. The goal is to spread the love, light, truth, acceptance, and oneness that is Jesus Christ himself. Here at the Jesus Witch podcast, we believe all people are loved by God and all people are loved by Jesus. We believe in community and the power of fellowship. We believe in giving whatever you reasonably can to help your neighbor who's in need. And above all, we believe in the power of creating a relationship with Jesus that is authentic and unique to you. Join me for new episodes of the Jesus Witch podcast every single Monday, and be sure to subscribe to us on your favorite podcasting app. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Jesus Witch podcast. I'm your host, Lena Elsaya Lee, also known as Lena the Jesus Witch on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube, which I'm attempting to build up, but building a YouTube is really hard and the comments are kind of scary there. This week on the Jesus Witch podcast, we are going to be talking all about working with music. I absolutely love using music in my practice, and I've been wanting to make this episode mainly because I want to talk about Taylor Swift and Boy Genius and how I work with them in my magic, but this is my podcast, so I could talk about anything I want. So today we're going to be talking about working with music in magic. Before we hop into this episode, I want to remind you of a couple different ways you can help support the Jesus Witch podcast. First and foremost, don't forget to subscribe to the Jesus Witch podcast on whatever podcasting platform you're currently listening to us on, and give us a rating of 5 stars because that helps get the word out about the show. The Jesus Witch podcast also has a Patreon. On there we have early and ad-free episodes of the Jesus Witch podcast, transcribed episodes of the show, as well as resources to help you learn more about Jesus witchery, such as tarot spreads, Bible-based spells, and spell casting circles, as well as one-on-one sessions with me each month to help you on your practice and continue on your journey. I also have an Etsy shop where I offer Bible-based spell oils, Jesus and Christian Witch mystery boxes, Talking to Jesus tarot card readings, soul contract readings, astrology readings. I offer a bunch of different things on my Etsy shop, so go check that out. You can find the link for it in the show notes page along with the Patreon link, and there's also a place where you can donate directly to the show if you just want to contribute and help us keep going. Now that we've gotten that out of the way, let's jump into our episode about working with music. Last year, I made an episode of the Jesus Witch podcast where we talked all about worship and what it is. And in that episode, I talked a little bit about music, but I didn't talk a lot about it. I talked more about physical acts of worship that you could do. And then when I did talk about music, I ended up talking a lot about Christian contemporary music. And that's fine. I still love Christian contemporary music. If you're a part of our Jesus Witch Church, which is the free Discord group that I host, we do a lot of different song circles and worship circles, and during those worship circles we listen exclusively to Christian contemporary music. We also have ones where we don't listen to Christian contemporary music, but anyway, during our worship specific things or Jesus Witch church services, where we'll listen to worship and then we'll read the Bible together. We'll listen to some Christian music, Christian specific music, before we read the Bible together, just to get in the mood. And because I'm trying to make it look like a church service, but not an evangelical church service, like a Jesus Witch church service, because we pull tarot cards at the end. Anyway, I digress. My whole point of that is Christian music is great. It's fun to listen to. I love it. I'm actually going to a Christian music concert with my mom in August, and I'm excited for that. But you don't only have to use Christian contemporary music to work with God or work with Jesus. And I want to talk about that today. I want to talk about the music that I work with in my practice, how I work with music, what it means to me, and all these different things. I really love music. Firstly, I'm a Taurus, right? Tauruses are very musical. We are ruled by Venus, which is a music planet. I also was as a kid, I was voice trained for forever, literally forever. And I did a lot of auditions. I did a lot of different things. I actually did X Factor back in the day, and I got to the point where I sang in front of the judges, but I messed up because I was nervous, so then I didn't get put through. But they said I was really talented, and Simon Cowell was so nice to me, and he was like, audition again next year because you're great. And I'm like, I don't want to be a singer anymore. That was fucking embarrassing. So anyway, I mean, like, I have a history with music, so I really love music and I really love singing. So I wanted to talk about that on the podcast because a big part of this podcast, a reason why I create, is going to be a little tangent. But a big reason why I create and I do things is because I want to do it, and because I like the content that I create, and I like to consume the content I create. And I feel like that's extremely important as a content creator, as somebody who is doing things that are creative for a living. Because if I don't like what I'm doing, how should I expect anybody to like what I'm doing? So sometimes I make podcast episodes that I make for me. And if I'm the only one that listens to that podcast episode, unhappy because I made something that I like. And I think that's really important for content creators and people who want to do things, especially like in the spiritual space, because it's so easy to just like do shit that other people want you to do and like let the lifeblood suck out of you of your spirituality. And that's like the last thing you want to do. So I am making this episode for me because I love music and I want to talk about it and I want to share my love of music with you. So, firstly, because this is the Jesus Witch podcast, let's go through a couple of Bible verses about music, because music is mentioned so many different times in the Bible. It is really important in the Bible, too. So, I want to talk about that just to be consistent with the theme of the show. The first verse that we're going to look at is Psalm 95, verse 1, which says, "Come, let us sing for joy to the Lord. Let us shout aloud to the rock of our salvation." The next verse that we're going to look at is Ephesians 5:19, which says, "Speaking to one another with psalms, hymns, and songs from the Spirit. Sing and make music from your heart to the Lord." I really love that verse. I really love that verse. That's one of my favorite verses as a music girly, and specifically as a lyric girly who really uses music to like tell God my thoughts. I love that. That's just so good. The next verse I want to look at is Psalm 71, verse 23, which says, "My lips will shout for joy when I sing praise to you, I, who you have delivered." I think that one's a really sweet one because it's about singing for joy and like really appreciating the things that God has given you. I think that one's really sweet. I really like it too. The next verse I have written is Psalm 105, verse 2, which says, "Sing to him, sing praises to him, tell of all of his wonderful acts." The next one I have written down is Psalm 101, verse 1, which says, "I will sing of your love and justice to you, Lord. I will sing praise." I really like that verse, that last one. I feel like you could use in some sort of justice magic spell. I may have used it in a justice magic spell before, but I find it a really good one because it talks about singing of his love and his justice. And I think that's important, especially like when we're asking God to help us with justice or help us feel okay about a situation where we were victimized, just recognizing how he's the ultimate judge. So I really like that. I found a whole list of 27 Bible verses about songs and about singing. I'm going to leave them in the show notes page for our Patreon supporters. If you didn't know, Patreon supporters also get extended show notes pages. So they get all of the notes that I write when I write the Jesus Witch podcast. There's all the information that I have when I research. So it's, if you want to grab the extended show notes page, that's available on the Fool and Up tiers. Now that we know some Bible verses that mention music and singing and song, let's talk about using songs for spell work. And if you want to know exactly how I charge my songs for spell work, I have a Patreon post with that, with a grimoire page of how I do that and the Bible verse that I use to charge all of my spell work songs with. So anyway, and I also have on Patreon for this specific episode a playlist with all of the songs that I mention in this video, or this part of the video, for like, they're my spellwork song. It's a spellwork song playlist. So that's available on Patreon too. Firstly, let's talk about some songs for Justice Magic, because Justice Magic is my personal favorite way to use song spell work. I don't like to sit and dwell on situations that really bothered me, but certain songs will remind me of those situations, and because of that, I will charge those songs to be spells for those situations, so that when I'm listening to those songs and I'm being reminded of it anyway, right, I'm having some good karma being thrown and good energy being thrown my way. So a couple of songs that I like to use for Justice Magic. This is a really obvious one. "Karma" by Taylor Swift. Obviously that song is about doing your best to be a good person, and despite being a good person, bad things happening to you, but keeping, keeping your side of the street clean, as Taylor says, and like keeping your head high and doing what you're supposed to do, and then eventually watching how karma comes back around, and you see your enemies fall. And I mean, we've seen this with Taylor Swift in pretty practical manners. I'm not going to go into the whole lore of like Taylor Swift and her music and whatever, but if you see people who have wronged her throughout her career, and the ways that either she has righted those wrongs, or society as a whole has righted those wrongs from those specific people, it's very interesting to watch. And she really, all she does is make her music, do her business, perform for her fans. Like, she keeps her side of the street clean. She helps other artists out. She supports, queer artists. She supports a lot of young female artists. She brings people who are not as well known on tour with her. And she really like supports types of people that she can. And she does what she can to keep her side of the street clean. And you've seen karma work in her favor. So because of that, I use her song Karma to help karma work in my favor. But before Karma, because Karma's a relatively new song, there was I Bet You Think About Me. That song, for me, I cannot listen to that song without thinking, I'm just going to be very blunt with you, without thinking of my accident. I really can't. So for me, I've charged that song to be a spell for the woman that I was in the accident with. And anytime I listen to it, I just want her to get a little twinge, a little thought about what she did that night, about like being sober, about not drunk driving again. Like, I really want her to have like a little moment where she's like, okay, I gotta straighten my life. I can't do this again, sort of thing. So that's the goal. That's how I use that specific song. And whenever I listen to it, that's my intention, is that she thinks about me and she feels bad and she feels like she needs to get better for her life. So I also think that that's an important thing to note. When I do a lot of like justice magic, it's not sending negative energy to that person. It's like genuinely like, I want you to feel better about yourself. I want you to stop doing these things so that you're hurting other people, because you're hurting so much yourself, and I want you to get help. So that is my goal in a lot of my justice magic, and very specifically with that song I Bet You Think About Me, when I direct it at the woman who rear-ended me because she decided drunk driving was a good idea, which it's not. The last song that I like to use for justice magic is Bite the Hand by Boy Genius. I really love Boy Genius. Bite the Hand is a song where somebody's good for you, but you also know somebody's bad for you. So it's like a kind of like boundaries magic spell, if that makes sense. For me, at least that's what I use it as. It's like a very much like, I'm gonna stay in my lane, I'm gonna do what's best for me, I'm gonna be what I can for this person, but I'm also just going to make sure that I'm okay through the relationship, because ultimately that's what's most important to me, is that I'm growing and that I'm okay. And if that sounds selfish, oh well, so be it. Because if I'm not doing well, if I'm not doing good mentally, if I'm not holding up my boundaries, and I'm not feeling good as a person, I'm not being a good mom, and I'm not being a good wife. And ultimately, that's what I need to be. I need to be a good wife to my husband, because we need to be partners together, and we need to raise our kids and have a family and have a house together. And then I need to be a good mom to my kids, because I got to raise good humans, and in order to raise good humans, you got to be a good mom. Not saying that good people who don't have good parents can't be good humans, but just, I think it's a little bit easier to be a good human if your parents are good to you, and if your parents intentionally try, and your parents admit when they're wrong and say sorry to you, and do their best to have boundaries with you, but give you what you want as well. And that's what I do. And if I'm not holding boundaries with everybody, then I can't do that in my home. And it's most important to do that in my home. So I do it with everybody. And I've used that song to help me and encourage me to do so. Now let's talk about some songs for love spells. I could probably use a lot of Taylor Swift's discography for love spells, but I only picked one song. I had some self-control there. I picked Daylight by Taylor Swift. That's a very specific song to me and my husband, and specifically like the bridge where she says like, back and forth from New York's like sneaking in your bed. That was a lot of like our early relationship, is going back and forth in different parts of New York and like sneaking around with each other because we were in high school. And like it was really like, it's like a romantic line for me. So for me, I listen to that song and I kind of like affirm that my husband's who I want to be with. He's my soulmate. He's he tries so hard for me. He does, like, literally, that man, if I say jump, he says how high. And I really appreciate that. And I don't take it for granted. I'm not saying it to be a snarky, brat or whatever. It's just like he cares a lot about me. And in the same respect, like he asks me to jump, I'm going to say how high, like sort of thing. We have that mutual respect for each other. And I like to strengthen our relationship with spells. And we have a lot of songs that we use for spell work together, but Daylight by Taylor Swift is probably my favorite one. Another one that I really like for love spells, and I haven't personally used this song for a love spell because I haven't specifically been in this situation, but when I was thinking about this episode and like using magic or using music for magic, like what kind of love spell would I like to cast sort of thing if I was a single person or like somebody in the beginning of a relationship, right? And for me, it's like that anticipation and like that like spark of meeting somebody and like wanting it to grow with them and that curiosity of like letting it grow with them. And for that reason, I picked Ceilings by Lizzie Appline. I told her Lily Appline. Oops, Lizzie Appline. Everybody probably knows that song because it was viral on TikTok for a while. I really love the lyricism in that song. And if you listen to Lizzie's genius performance of it and her explain the song, it's really supposed to be anticipation and like the build up to having a good relationship sort of thing. So I feel like this is a song that if I was using it in spell work, I wouldn't direct it towards a specific person, but I would direct it towards a specific feeling of that like anticipation and that like building up and that joy of a new relationship and that joy of like meeting your person, and use that to like charge, when I'm manifesting a person or when I'm manifesting, places I can meet my person sort of thing. I would definitely use that song for that sort of thing. I hope that made sense, but I really like that song, Ceilings. I think it would be a really cute little love song or a love spell song, so go check it out. It's cute. Now let's talk about some songs for joy magic. So these are like upbeat songs, fun songs, songs that make you feel good about yourself. When I was thinking about like joy magic songs, the first song that popped into my head was Happy by Pharrell Williams. Again, this is not a song I've personally used in my magic. It's honestly a song that I kind of can't stand, but when I think about songs for joy, that popped in my head, so I felt like I had to share it because that might be your favorite song, and if it is, that's awesome. Everybody's allowed to have different tastes in music. Nobody has to be as niche and square as me and only listen to like Taylor Swift and indie music. But I think that could be definitely like a really fun one to use for joy, especially because if you think about the lyrics for it, it's because I'm happy. Because I'm happy. And it talks about being happy, right? That's like, if you're keeping saying that over and over and over again, and that's what you're affirming to yourself, you're going to feel happy, even if it's just for the moment that you hear that song and then you dance to that song or whatever. So yeah, I really like that song just for the idea of, feeling more joyful and feeling more happy and, cultivating some more happiness into your life sort of thing. The next song, and this is a song that I personally use for my joy magic, is Me by Taylor Swift. And if you're a Me hater, listen, if you're a Me hater, if you're a Shake It Off hater, if you're a We Are Never Getting Back Together hater, if you're a You Belong With Me hater, like if you're a Bejeweled hater, you don't know how to have fun. I really like using the song Me to build my self-confidence. Like, I promise you're never going to find nobody like me. Like, those lyrics, they're so simple. They're so basic. And Taylor Swift wrote that song for kids, right? And it's a fun song to listen to if you have kids because it's a great message for them. But it's also just a fun one to listen to and dance to and gain self-confidence and gain joy within yourself. So I really like to use it for that. The last one I really like to use for joy is Treat People With Kindness by Harry Styles. Listen, I'm a girly pop from New York. Here being mean's a culture. I was bullied for over 10 years. Sometimes I could be a little, snarky and I don't want to deal with people. So for me, I like to listen to Treat People With Kindness, especially on a day where I'm feeling really snarky, get myself in the mood and remind myself of who I actually want to be. And for me, being a kind person, being not necessarily always presenting as happy, but being kind, asking people how they are, not being rude, especially if I'm going out and going to a place where I'm going to interact with a cashier or something like that. I really don't want to be rude. I don't want to be somebody that they go home and talk about because I've worked as a cashier and I have done that. And I don't want somebody to feel how people have made me feel because of me. So if I'm really not feeling good and I'm not feeling like I want to treat people with kindness, I'll put that song on. I've charged that song to be a spell for me. I'll do the boot scoot a couple of times. And, I start feeling a little bit more joyful and I can tolerate people enough that I'm not going to be a New Yorker. Then for Confidence Magic, music's also really fun for Confidence Magic. One, you can use the song Confident by Demi Lovato. I think that one's pretty self-explanatory because in that song they're not apologizing for being confident. They're saying like, what's wrong with it? There's nothing wrong with it, so I'm going to be confident. And I feel like that's a really powerful song. That's a really powerful message. So if you're somebody who struggles with self-confidence, charging that song to help you gain confidence could be useful. I also feel like Bejeweled by Taylor Swift could be a really great confidence song. It's all about like how for Taylor Swift, I know she's described it as like her return to pop music after doing Evermore and Folklore, where they were more mellowed out albums. So this was like her like I can still be a pop artist, I could still be sparkly, I could still shimmer like sort of thing. And I feel like even if you're not Taylor Swift and not returning to pop music, that can be so applicable, especially as a mom. Mama. Like yeah, mama. Shh, let mama record. What?
Then why are there purple things?
Why are there purple? That's the sound waves of mommy talking. Scott's been sitting with me this whole entire time that I've been recording. Right, Scott? Yeah, he's nodding. But anyway.
I'm waiting for you done.
Yeah, I know you're waiting for me to be done. Every mom has had a moment where they've felt really frumpy, where they've just not felt good in their skin. They don't feel like who they are. And I feel like that really happens after having a baby or, being home with kids for a really long time and being a stay-at-home mom, where you're kind of like, I don't know if I can actually be a person sort of thing. So I really like using the song Bejeweled to like remind myself that even though I am a mom, even though I have, limitations because I'm a mom and I can't, like dress up and go places all the time, like sort of thing, like I can still shimmer, I can still shine, I can still have fun, I can still live my own life. Like I'm not just a mom. I'm so much more than a mom. Every mom is so much more than just a mom. Being a mom's great. I love being a mom, but I'm not just a mom, and I don't want to just be a mom. And I think that's totally okay. I don't think you have to just want to be a mom. And Bejeweled reminds me that I don't just have to be a mom. So the last song that I really like to use for Confidence Magic, and I think this is very specific to me, is Solar Power by Lorde. And specifically because of the line, I'm kind of like a prettier Jesus. Because sometimes, like, I've shared a lot about my experiences with imposter syndrome and not feeling like I'm good enough to be doing what I'm doing, right? Not like feeling like I should be being heard, which is totally false. It's like it's a lie that my brain tells me sort of thing. And that song kind of is like, no, I am meant to be talking. I'm kind of like a prettier Jesus. And I know that the meaning of that song is like to embrace summer and like throw your phone away and go relax and like enjoy warmth and that like the happiness that summer brings, and getting out of like seasonal depression is, I think that's pretty much what Lorde wrote it about. But for me, it's about being confident in what I'm doing and knowing that Jesus sent me down this path and I can be confident in it. So that's why I like to use Solar Power by Lorde in my magic. Now let's talk about some songs that I really like to use as spells to let go of difficult emotions. So the first song that I love, and this is my personal song of the summer, Not Strong Enough by Boy Genius. It is so freaking good. I love that song so much. That song for me is a lot about feeling not good enough to just do anything to perform, to be there for other people, not knowing why you have executive dysfunction and kind of like wallowing it and in it. And for me, that like helps. That's like a cathartic release of emotions. And I really like using that song to just let go of like a really bad day or a really hard, like especially a day where like I feel like I acted like not cool, you know what I'm saying? Like where my mental health was making me kind of be like a bitch to my kids or, just be a little bit more difficult or something like that. I really like that song to like let go of those feelings, especially when I know that my mental health caused me to be the problem that day. I really like using that song for that. And to let go of like the guilt that you feel after that sort of, those kinds of days. The next song I really like is Supercut by Lorde. That one's a really good one, just to like let go of like trauma with relationships and with other people. I know that song's written about a romantic relationship. I use it about like personal relationships with like friends and things like that. So I really like it for letting go of like hard and difficult people, especially because at the end she says like that she thought she did everything right. In her head she does everything right, and for me that's something that I resonate a lot with, because like again I have this like a blame where I blame myself for a lot of things, even when they're not necessarily my fault. So it's like cathartic and it helps me let go of that feeling. Another song that I really like for letting go of big and difficult emotions is A Salt in the Wound by Boy Genius. And this one specifically, I feel like I tie it a lot to like religious trauma and feeling like a sinner and feeling gross sometimes for, everybody like struggles with what they do, and like the question of like, oh, is what I'm doing actually right? Is, am I going to heaven? Am I going to hell? For me, I struggle a lot with like believing if like afterlife's real, and actually like, believing wholeheartedly that earth isn't the end. And that really haunts me. That's something that's really hard for me to deal with in my spirituality. I think that's the most difficult thing that I deal with. And Salt in the Wound helps me deal with the aspects of religion that have made it really hard for me to just believe in like a happy ever after when we die, because of the aspect of hell and because of like the torment that the church teaches us happens after you die. So I really like using that song to work through that. Another song that I really like to work through big emotions, I'm going to just spitball the last two: Motion Sickness by Phoebe Bridgers and Night Shift by Lucy Dacus. Both of those are just really cathartic songs, good songs to just like sing out. Night Shift's more of like, if you need to belt something out, belt that song out. If you just need to complain, Motion Sickness is really good for just like complaining almost. I love that song. When I saw it live, I was so happy. But anyway, those are songs that I really like to use to let go of big, heavy emotions that are difficult to let go of. Let's talk about some songs that help let go of anxiety. So for me, I only have two that I wrote down. They're both Taylor Swift songs. One, Fearless, because head first fearless. Like, if I'm afraid to do something, I literally just say, okay, head first fearless, head first fearless, head first fearless. And I do it. I do it because I've created that as a mantra from listening to that song so many times, so I use it like as like a mini spell of sorts. And then my favorite anti-anxiety song, my favorite Taylor Swift song of all time, because I'm a basic bitch, Shake It Off. Shake It Off. When people on the internet are telling me I'm going to go to hell, shake it off. When people on the internet are talking shit because their ego's too big, shake it off. When people on the internet are trying to correct me because their faith is so little that they don't believe that you could look at Jesus in any other kind of way, shake it off. When, drunk driver hit me and now I'm afraid to drive, shake it off. Because that's really only a once in a lifetime experience. If that happened twice, I would have 2 nickels. You just shake it off. No matter what happens in life, just shake it off. Yeah, that's really it. It's like I know that some of the examples I used are like bigger and like like obviously like more consequential, but for me, I saw something recently that really was impactful for me, and it said like, if this thing is not gonna matter in 5 years from now, I'm not gonna worry about it. So that's it for me. If this is not going to bother me in 5 years, if I'm not going to be living in this situation in 5 years from now, shake it off. Shake it off. That's it. That's that. Finally, let's talk about some songs that I like to use for protection. One, Fireproof by One Direction. The song is actually kind of funny if you think about like how it came it to be. Liam's apartment was on fire and he ran out of the fire without getting any burns or any fire on him, and he was like, oh man, I'm fireproof. So they did that whole song about that. But this is the most backwards. I think you guys are gonna have like a huge explanation into how my brain works right now. This is the most backwards way to relate something. But because I heard that description of why Fireproof by One Direction came to be, it reminded me of the story in Daniel of Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego, who were put in the fiery furnace, and because they were, worshiping God when the pagan king wanted them to worship idols, sort of thing, and God protected them, and they didn't get burned at all. Was that in Daniel or was that in Numbers? Oh my gosh, I don't remember where it was in the Bible, but I'm sure that when Charlie's doing the transcript for this episode, they will note it for people on Patreon, so exactly where it is. But yeah, it reminded me of that. It reminded me how God protected me, or protected Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego from the furnace he flames, whatever. So now I use the song Fireproof by One Direction as a protection song from God. So yeah, that's how my brain works. Anyway, the next song that I wrote down is Jumpsuit by 21 Pilots. Jumpsuit by 21 Pilots is very much an analogy for Jesus. Like, the whole time it's jumpsuit, cover me. Like, he's talking about how like his life is unsteady and he needs this jumpsuit to cover him so he can go through life's experiences. If you did not know, 21 Pilots is worship music without being worship music. We'll talk about that later. But that song is really great for protection. So if you are an alternative person and you lack 21 Pilots, that's a good one to use. 21 Pilots' catalog is great to use for spell work anyway. I'm just not a click girly anymore. I'm a Swiftie now, so I use mostly Taylor Swift stuff. Anyway, the last song that I wrote is Safe and Sound by Taylor Swift, because of course I had to write a Taylor Swift song. Honestly, this song reminds me of when we were driving home from Salem, when my friend Christina and I were driving back to my house from Salem, and we had like a crazy experience. One day I'm going to talk about it. It was like a crazy spiritual experience there. And we were driving home from Salem, and Charlie had charged Safe and Sound to be a protection song with Hestia. So after that, I was like, all right, I'm just going to put that one on my roster as a protection song. I almost started singing Pasta and Lobster to that song, but no, we're not going to do that. Anyway, those are songs that I use for spell work and why. Again, for Patreon peoples, there is the playlist of all the songs that I mentioned, available on Spotify, and it's linked in your show notes page. So yeah, let's now talk about some worship music for my deities, because like I love using music to worship, but I don't necessarily like to use worship music like Christian contemporary music all the time, and I don't work with just Christian deities, so I feel like if I'm trying to bop to Jesus, and I'm like doing that with Venus, I mean, like, I don't feel like she's gonna resonate with that. So let's talk about some worship music that I like to use with my deities. I know a lot of people use playlists for specific deities. I am not a playlist person per se, unless like all of the songs in a playlist are one very specific genre or one artist. I don't like to mix my music. It's just, I go into music for a very specific kind of experience, and for me, at this moment in time, I really don't like to mix my music. I've tried to make more eclectic playlists that have, like, Fall Out Boy and Taylor Swift and Boy Genius and, like, everything I listen to in one, but I'm not a fan of those. So for me, my deity worship, and like when I use music to worship deities, I will usually assign a specific artist or a specific album to a deity, so that when I am specifically like trying to channel in on their energy, I listen to that artist or I listen to that album, and it makes me think of them. For the Abrahamic God, I do have a playlist of worship music that isn't Christian. For him specifically, I like to listen to a lot of Christian adjacent music. So stuff that sounds so similar to gospel, but if you listen to the words, it's not gospel. So this playlist includes, and it's linked on the show notes page for our Patreon supporters. This playlist includes things from Boy Genius, such as like Stay Down and Salt in the Wound, which both have religious imagery, thanks to our queen, Julian Baker. We're going to talk about her later. But there's a lot of religious imagery, specifically in like Stay Down. It talks about like, hold me under like a sinner, like hold me under the water because I'm a sinner. In Salt in the Wound, Julian talks about, gnashing teeth like a child of Cain, and basically like being looked at as inherently bad in the way that, Cain was the brother who murdered Abel. So after that, it was like he was quote unquote inherently bad. So it's like trying to come back from like a really difficult situation like that, or being like looked at as a really bad person and then coming back from that. So it's very religious adjacent to me. Because we're talking about Boy Genius, I also have Not Strong Enough by them, Revolution Zero, and Satanist on this playlist. Not Strong Enough just sounds like a worship song to me. It's literally like a depressed worship song. Like, I have definitely heard Christian music that sounds so similar to it. Revolution Zero is about having an imaginary friend that lives in your head, and that's like the person that you talk to and you correspond with, and they give you feedback on your problems. And like sometimes that's what a relationship with God feels like, right? Where you're like just talking to this thing that sometimes is giving you feedback, sometimes is not. You don't really know if it's listening to you. But you're doing your best to be close to them and, do things for them and live the way that they want you to live. And I feel like that's what Revolution Zero, when I apply it specifically to as a worship song, that's what it means for me. Satanist, it mentions Solomon writing Ecclesiastes. So that's why for me it is a worship song that's not Christian. A couple of other things that I have 4 Julian Baker songs on here. Distant Solar Systems. Distant Solar Systems is like the worship Julian Baker song. Like 100%. That is like, oh my gosh, I love it. Then Go Home is another one where it's like a really sad song about like feeling like you want to just leave earth and home being, home with God. Same with Sour Breath and Happy to Be Here. Those are similar to like that, where it's like asking God, why is there something wrong with you but not with other people? For me, worship is very cathartic. I use music for a very cathartic sort of, in a cathartic way. Then I have Next of Kin by Lucy Dacus, which, like, Lucy Dacus also has some religious imagery in her work. Not as much as Julian Baker, but there's definitely some. This song for me doesn't have as much religious imagery as, like, other songs, but it gives me, like, the vibe of, like, like a little, like, worship song that you'd sing on at church on Sunday with your kids there, and you like, bring it to the next of kin. And so it gives me that vibe, and I get, like, kind of like a more upbeat vibe from God when I listen to it. I don't know. Then there's Call Your Mom by Noah Khan. That song for me is worshipy in the sense that it's about like a person being in a really, really, really dark place and them needing help. And for me, sometimes, if I really need help in a dark place, I reach out to God for that. Not that I think that you shouldn't go to mental health professionals, because that's like so important. Like, I am magic and mundane. Don't get that twisted. I think getting like proper help is really important, but it's also important to get spiritual help. And sometimes, you just got to call your mom or call your dad, like kind of thing, which meaning, the big man upstairs kind of thing. Then I have Graceland 2 by Phoebe Bridgers, which is a song about like serious devotion and being like really devoted to somebody and like wanting to take care of them even when they're in a bad place. So I apply that with God. Sometimes I feel like it's God singing it to me. Sometimes I feel like I'm singing it to God, because like at the end she goes whatever she wants, like sort of thing, and repeating that. So like I'll sing that to God. And another Phoebe Bridgers song that has a lot of religious imagery in it is Chinese Satellites. So I have that on my playlist as well. And then the final 5 songs are all 21 Pilot songs: Hometown, Formidable, Aircatcher, Ode to Sleep, and Screen. We're going to talk about 21 Pilots later. Like, we're going to talk about Julian Baker later, because they are Christian music without being Christian music. But these 4 specifically songs, like, they are the most Christian-y of 21 Pilot songs. In my opinion, a lot of them have religious imagery. A lot of them draw back to Bible verses. A lot of them are essentially worship songs, but for me, these are like the most prevalent. Hometown, literally, there's a line where he's saying, put away all the gods your fathers served today. Put away the traditions they made, whatever. I'm messing up the lyrics because I don't have them right in front of me. But anyway, it's referring to a verse back in Judges where God's telling like the people, or like they're being told, the Israelites are being told, hey, don't have these idols, don't worship false idols, don't keep traditions, like worship in the moment. That's really where like these specific laws were being established. And in the song Hometown, that's what Tyler is referring back to. Formidable for me is like, that's such a sweet song. I imagine God singing that song to me. It's so cute. Aircatcher is another one where like it's talking about confessing and like talking, like giving your biggest and deepest, darkest secrets and not having those things being used against you. And just being willing to give God your all and just talk to him about things. Then Ode to Sleep, that like, go listen to Ode to Sleep and tell me that song is not a worship song. Like, ask forgiveness 3 times, same amount that I denied. Okay, Peter. Like, it's literally like refers to the whole crucifixion, the things that Tyler learned from that, and it's a God adjacent song for me. Then the final one is Screen. For me, way back in the day when I was in the church, I guess that wasn't way back in the day by now. Well, I mean, that was like a good amount of years ago. I think I left my church about 5-ish years ago. But anyway, when I was in the church, 21 Pilots was a big thing for me. And Scream, specifically, that song was like my confirmation song. Like, I knew God was listening to me if I put my playlist on shuffle, like my 21 Pilots playlist on shuffle, and the first thing that played was Scream. So I left this playlist with all of those songs so you can listen to them and like kind of learn the religious imagery within them, and then, be able to go back into your music and find religious imagery in them to give to God. Too, I left the playlist in the link to the playlist in the show notes page for our Patreon supporters. The only other thing, like music wise, that's not Christian music, because if I'm going to worship God specifically, I do like to use Christian music with him, just because it's like nostalgic. It makes me remind myself of like the happy moments in the church, because I really do like music and I really do appreciate it. So I do like to use Christian music with him, but I also like to use The Record by Boy Genius. That whole album gives me worshipy vibes. You know, we talked about a few songs off of there, but like their music gives me such worshipy vibes, and The Record specifically feels very Father God. So that's the album that I associate with him. Now, moving on to Jesus, I have 4 albums that I associate with Jesus. Solar Power by Lord, because of the song Solar Power, and I feel like it's a very sunny, summery album. I feel like it's very, like, you know, it's a sad girl album, but it's also like a happy girl, like, growing up, getting hopeful album. And that's like a lot of like what I see Jesus as, is this, like, you know, he had trials, he had hardships, but he always preached hope, he always preached faith, he always preached love. So I associate Solar Power with Jesus because of that. Then Evermore by Taylor Swift. That album feels very Jesus-y because it's a cathartic album. However, it's an album that focuses a lot on healing and, you know, working through your problems and like reflecting on them. And I feel like that's super Jesus-y. Harry's House by Harry Styles. That's a really fun album. Something that makes you happy. I feel like it's good for inner child work too, because a lot of us grew up listening to One Direction. And if you did not listen to grow up listening to One Direction, find an artist that aligns with like or reminds you of something that happened or like that you listened to in your childhood, and maybe, you know, switch out Harry's House for that. But then the last album that I associate Jesus with is the Boy Genius EP that came out in 2018. That has a lot more like the darker religious imagery on it, but I feel like it's very gospel-y, very Jesus-y, and it really talks about being in the trenches, which is something I feel like Jesus understands. So that's why I associate the EP with him. For Ashra, who I associate as the Abrahamic Divine Feminine, she's very like hippie indie music, so like anything like of that genre I listen to with her. Folklore by Taylor Swift specifically. I feel like the difference between Folklore and Evermore is a little bit more mellow, and you know there are some really like heart-wrenching songs on Folklore. Like you got My Tears Ricochet, you got This Is Me Trying, and you have Mirror Ball. But for the most part, those songs are a little bit more upbeat than Evermore is. So that's why I don't listen to Evermore with her. Evermore really just feels like Jesus. And then Folklore really feels Ashra. I don't know. If you're a Taylor Swift girly, you'll get it. Like, you'll get why. You'll understand that. But anyway, I also like to listen to anything by Raising Appalachia with her. They have a lot of like more like hippie-y, kind of like, you know, like woodsy-y songs. Like the one that's like popping in my head as I think about them is like Stand Like an Oak, an Anchor, an Alder. And they just like list all these different trees to be strong like. So I love Rising Appalachia. They're so cool. They're great and they're like fun for connecting with the divine feminine. Yeah, so I recommend listening to them if you work with Ashra. So then we got Lilith, and Lilith is the last deity that I work with that's in the Abrahamic pantheon. For her, obviously, Reputation by Taylor Swift. I feel like that's super self-explanatory. Another one that I associate with Lilith really closely is Midnights by Taylor Swift. I feel like that album has like the whole sultry, mysterious vibe that Lilith gives off, but it's also an album that really helps you reclaim your own power because of songs like Karma and Bejeweled. So for that, and Vigilante shit, almost forgot about Vigilante shit. So for that reason, I associate Midnights with Lilith, but I also associate any rap music that makes you feel like a bad bitch. In the extended show notes page for our Patreon supporters, I'm gonna leave my personal rap playlist on there. I have a lot of Cardi B, a lot of Doja Cat, a lot of Meg Thee Stallion, a little bit of Jack Harlow, and Lil Nas X. I really love Cardi B though. She's my absolute favorite. I just think she has like such a cool attitude about life. She's also from the South Bronx, so she's a New York girly. So I love her for that. But I associate rap music with Lilith because it's so fucking powerful. Like, women in rap are not afraid to talk about their power. They're not afraid to talk about their money. They're not afraid to talk about their bodies being hot. They're not afraid to talk about, you know, men that they're conquesting. And like, basically, they treat men in music the way that men treat women. And it is fucking fantastic. They do it a lot more tastefully than men do, I must say. And I love it. I absolutely love it. So, you know, when I'm doing my dishes and I need to get some bad bitch Lilith energy because I hate doing the dishes, but it's something that, like, you know, it makes me a better person, makes me, you know, feel better as a person to do it. It makes me feel more confident in myself if I do the dishes, if I actually, like, stop, like, dragging my feet and do it. Also, this is going to sound so contrary because Lilith is, like, not a please a man kind of deity, but it makes my husband so happy when I do the dishes, and it makes Lilith so happy when my husband's happy, because that man, literally, I say jump, he says how high. He does everything for me. Like, I anything that I ask that man to do, he makes it happen. And if he asks me to do the dishes every once in a while, I should fucking do that. He treats me like a queen. Lilith loves him because of the way that he treats me. So, because of that, Lilith encourages me to do the dishes, and, you know, we put on some rap music. I don't play it out loud because I don't want my kids to hear that kind of music just yet. So put it in my headphones, and then, you know, her and I, you know, we pop it, and we do them dishes, and we get it done. So when I said that Lilith was the last deity that I'm going to talk about from the Abrahamic pantheon in this list, I half lied, because technically she is the last deity that I'm going to talk about, but I do want to make a note that I do work with St. Paul, and with him, he likes Evermore. First of all, St. Paul, sad girly. Second of all, he's all about the healing. 2 Corinthians 12, all about using your weaknesses as your strengths, boasting about the things that have hurt you, boasting about your pain, and I feel like Evermore encapsulates that a lot. So he is an Evermore girly. So the two non-Abrahamic deities that I work with are Venus and Loki. So Venus is a love girl. She loves love songs. She loves more romantic music, at least in the aspect that I work with her in. So for that reason, I associate Lover, Fearless, and Speak Now, those 3 albums by Taylor Swift, with Venus, and that's the music that I exclusively use to work with her. For Loki, he really likes anything by One Direction, anything by Harry Styles, anything that's like really fun, out of pocket, goofy. He also likes some of the songs that are on Red by Taylor Swift, like We're Never Ever Getting Back Together, 22. So he just likes really fun pop songs for the most part. He's a fun pop girly, and I love that for him. I vibe to Dua Lipa with him sometimes as I'm talking about music for him, like literally that new Dua Lipa song for the Barbie music, the dance the night away, that like went in my head like automatically. He just like loves fun pop music, groovy pop music. I also feel like Young Gravy. I personally don't listen to Young Gravy. I've tried a little bit of his stuff, and, you know, aside from like the stuff that like gets viral on TikTok, I'm not a big fan of his music, unfortunately. I really wanted to like him. He's like on the list of things that I really want to like, but I don't. That list includes Lana Del Rey, Coffee, Anime, and Young Gravy. It's a really random fucking list. But anyway, those are the musics that I associate with my specific deities, and how I divide them out to my different deities. So finally, I just want to circle back to Julian Baker and 21 Pilots, because I feel like those two specific artists kill the game of making worship music that is not worship music. So 21 Pilots, they both grew up in Columbus, Ohio. I know Tyler specifically, he was homeschooled for a period of time, and his parents were very Christian. He grew up very much in the church, learning about the church, learning about God. He's still involved with his church as far as I can tell. At some point, he actually like released music with his church, released gospel music with them, but a lot of his songs, and especially early 21 Pilots songs, like probably from Tyler's first solo album, No Fun Intended, through to like half of Trench, is very religious in theme and in ideology. And if you are somebody who grew up in an evangelical church, or grew up reading the Bible, or reads the Bible a lot now, you could go through 21 Pilots' songs, especially those first couple of albums, and find gospel. Like, it's not super hard. You know, just off of their self-titled album, they have songs like Fall Away, which is asking God to not leave him, like asking God for Tyler to not lose his faith. And then there's also songs like Addict with a Pen, which is talking all about like, you know, forgive me, Father, like I am somebody who's not like inherently quote unquote good, but I'm really trying. Can you help me to be a better person, sort of thing. There's also songs on the first album such as like Taxi Cab, or Car Torture to Death. Those two songs very clearly reference Jesus and the crucifixion. In Taxi Cab, it talks about how there's 3 men driving the cab, and it's clearly an analogy for the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, and them telling him to change himself, like sort of thing. So 21 Pilots is very, very, very religious. Or maybe religious isn't the right word, but they have a lot of Christian imagery and like themes throughout their stuff, especially their early stuff. So it's good for people who are deconstructing and trying to listen to worship music without listening to worship music. I don't listen to them a lot anymore. For me, I feel like I upgraded to Julian Baker. Not saying that like, 21 Pilots is bad. I still like their music. I'm not a big fan of their newer stuff. I kind of feel like Julian Baker is for, and I thought that this was an original thought, and then I literally saw somebody on TikTok say it after I sent it to my husband, where I said to him, I feel like people who listen to Julian Baker listened to 21 Pilots growing up, and now they listen to Julian Baker for a more mature way to express their religious trauma, and I literally saw that post on TikTok, and I was like, we don't have original thoughts on this planet ever. There's 7 billion people. So I really like her. She is a queer artist. She's also one of the members of Boy Genius. She's absolutely fantastic. And I highly recommend checking out her stuff if you are somebody who's dealt with a lot of religious trauma. Like I said before, my favorite song by her is Distant Solar Systems. In that song, she talks about how her and God talk, and sometimes it's not really consistent, but she understands that the platform that she has is to spread a message about him, and spread, like, even if that message is it's okay to, be gay and love God, or it's okay to be depressed and love God, it's okay to doubt and love God. And, it's really interesting how she funnels that in with her music, especially because her music deals with a lot of heavy topics such as like addiction and like suicidal ideation and things like that. So her music's really interesting. Her music has a lot of Christian imagery. I don't think it's as clear cut as 21 Pilots in some of the songs, but it's definitely worth giving a listen to. And I highly recommend giving her a listen. Her music's slower, but it's worth it. Listen to the lyrics, read the lyrics as you listen. I promise you will cry by the end of it, and it won't be a bad cry. It'll be a good letting go of religious trauma cry. So that is everything I have to say about working with music in Magick. Thank you guys so much for listening to this episode of the Jesus Witch podcast. And, this was like an episode I made for me. It was something that was really fun, something I wanted to do, something I wanted to write about, something I wanted to talk about. So I'm glad that I have an opportunity to do it. And thank you to everybody who decided to listen to me ramble on about my favorite musics and how I relate them to my deities and my practice. I really appreciate it because it's really one of my favorite things. I sometimes do call myself in like my personal life with like my husband and people that I talk to, I call myself a music witch because a lot of the time for me the most practical way to do magic every day is to listen to a playlist, listen to an artist, listen to a few songs. Like that's how I pump myself up, that's how I gain energy, that's how I can not control my energy, that's how I cope with different emotions and let go of specific emotions when I want to let go of them instead of them bleeding over into my everyday life. So I'm really happy that I got to share that with you. I got to tell you a little bit about my process and how I work with specific songs. If you liked this episode of the Jesus Witch podcast, don't forget to subscribe to us on whatever podcasting platform that you're currently listening to us on. Don't forget to follow me on all the social medias. I go by Lena the Jesus Witch on TikTok, on Instagram, on YouTube. I'm trying to get my YouTube back up, but YouTube's intimidating, okay? YouTube is where people go if they just want to leave the most rancid comments. I have gotten nasty comments on TikTok, gotten nasty comments on YouTube, on Instagram, but on YouTube? Oh my good golly, they leave you freaking essays of how you're going to hell. It's horrible, but I don't want to let that stop me because I hate letting other people's opinions of me stop me from doing anything. So yeah, I'm going to start posting on YouTube again. So if you could go follow me on there, give some support on videos when you see them, I really appreciate it. These would make the hate comments be a little bit less intimidating. And if you want to support the Jesus Witch podcast, I have a Patreon and Etsy shop, places to donate, all the different things. You can find them in the show notes page link, there's links in the show notes page. Also in the show notes page, you will find the link to our Jesus Witch Church, which is our free Discord group. Come join us over there. We do circles and church services, and we hang out, and it's a fun place to be. So come join us there. So yeah, that's this week's episode. Now let's do my favorite thing, which is our verse of the day. This week I picked a very basic verse, something that is just a good reminder for everybody to have, which is Psalm 56:3, which just says, "But when I'm afraid, I put my trust in you." That's it. It's super simple, super cute. I love that verse, and I just wanted to share it because when I was scrolling through my Bible app, that's the one that kind of just popped out to me. So, anyways, thank you so much for listening to this episode, and I will talk to you guys next week. Bye.